one of the first observations actually that struck me, one of the things that I saw when I was first with him, after I'd joined him in Delhi, we then went to Vrindavan, and we were there for about 10 days. So I got a real chance to see Prabhupada in action. By that time I was able to live in his quarters, and Prabhupada, the first instruction that he gave me was that now your only business is to be with me 24 hours a day. So I took that quite literally, except of course when I was asleep. But I was with him day in and day out, and I got the chance to observe everything that he did, everything that he spoke, every little action that he did. And it really struck me very strongly that Prabhupada was like a living Srimad Bhagavatam. You know, in the Bhagavatam there's a full description there of what it means to be Krishna conscious. And of course there's volumes and volumes of books that describe that. And if you read them, then it might seem like, well, this is going to take a long time, you know, to realize what all of this is. It's such a vast subject. You know, what does it mean to be Krishna conscious? But it was all there in Srila Prabhupada, you know, at every moment. So I saw that, I understood that, and I resolved in my mind that I would take as much advantage of the opportunity to see him as possible, that just by observing how he did everything, how he managed things, how he spoke, how he walked, how he relaxed, how he dealt individually with different people, you know, that would show me the best example of Krishna consciousness. And you know, it just really struck me. Prabhupada was like a living, breathing Bhagavatam. And I think the quality of Srila Prabhupada that really touched me the most was just the fact that he was so warm, and he was just so kind. It was such, I mean, from being with Prabhupada, you could immediately understand that he had a genuine concern for your welfare. He was serving us, you know, he was putting himself out in so many different ways, just to give us the chance for spiritual life. And it made you want to reciprocate by just offering whatever service that you could to Srila Prabhupada. So there was a nice reciprocation going on, and I always felt very, very comfortable in Prabhupada's presence. Of course, there was the formal guru-disciple relationship, and one had to be careful not to transgress that. But at the same time, Prabhupada was very, very accommodating. He was very, you know, wonderfully warm and humble person. And he always made you feel, you know, wanted. He always made you feel, you know, significant in some way, that he knew what you were doing and he was happy with it, and he would encourage you. Of course, he would also chastise you at different times if you did things wrong. But that chastisement had the same effect as, you know, his praise. It made you Krishna conscious, and you understood it was for your own benefit. It was never, you know, from any material kind of motivation. So that was the one thing that always stood out in my mind with Srila Prabhupada, was that he was very happy to be with us. He very much appreciated the fact that young men had given up the best part of their lives, you know, spreading the Krishna consciousness movement. And he always showed that appreciation. Whenever Prabhupada talked about anything, somehow or another, he could link it to Krishna consciousness and derive some kind of spiritual point from it. For instance, when we were in India, he would sometimes talk about the British rule in India and how they managed things. But he would always use that as a practical example for us, you know, how we should manage things. Sometimes he would talk about, you know, recent Indian history, but he would do it in such a way that he would point out how a person was either acting, you know, in a genuinely spiritual way, or whether it was just a mundane thing. He would relate it to, you know, say the degradation of Indian culture and why the Vedic culture was disappearing, or whatever. But Prabhupada had this unique ability to see Krishna in everything and to explain things in such a way that we could also see it. You know, he was always teaching, and Prabhupada was very conscious of the fact that he was always teaching us at every moment. He had, there was no private life for Srila Prabhupada. his life was the life of an acharya, so it meant that he was, you know, in the spotlight, so to speak, at every moment of every day. And he was remarkably consistent. That was another feature also that I appreciated, was that Prabhupada's absolute regularity in what he was doing always amazed me. You know, we traveled all around the world, and he would keep the same schedule, he would do the same things day in, day out, and be completely steady and not disturbed at all. And, you know, he would be up in the middle of the night translating his books. He would go out for his morning walk, he would take his massages, he would have his meals at the same time, no matter what. It didn't matter where we were going. Now, I was suffering jet lag, you know, as we traveled around. Prabhupada seemed completely impervious to it. It just didn't seem to affect him. He would just go right on. And as soon as we arrived in a new place, he would immediately be into his schedule, and that was it. He never showed any sign of, you know, fatigue or disturbance at all. So there was one time, it was on the disappearance day, of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. We were in Bombay, and this lady came for darshan in the afternoon. So she was a follower of another guru, and this man was a well-known Mayavadi. So during the course of the conversation, there was some discussion on the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, and of course this woman was espousing her guru's ideas of what the Bhagavad Gita actually meant. And especially there was one interpretation of Krishna, what Krishna meant. So of course in Sanskrit the word Krishna means dark. So this man had written in his commentary that Krishna means dark, dark means unknown, so the absolute is the unknowable, supreme, unmanifest, like this. It was a Mayavadi interpretation. So Prabhupada very quickly fired back that he said, well, if dark means unknown, if Krishna is unknown, then if he does not know Krishna, then why is he commenting on the Bhagavad Gita, which is Krishna's words? And he said that actually to the devotee, Krishna says, to the devotee, I am known. So he said, therefore this man, because he's not a devotee, he cannot know Krishna, and only the devotees can actually comment on the Bhagavad Gita. So Prabhupada was very expert. He could pick out the flaw in anybody's argument immediately. And of course in India you always got a lot of this kind of, you know, different kinds of interpretations and, you know, false ideas and misconstruing, you know, the words of the Bhagavad Gita. But Prabhupada was very expert on keeping a person focused that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada liked to eat fairly simply. His, you know, standard fare was for breakfast he had cut fruits. He would often take freshly fried cashew nuts. In India, sometimes we would give him a bowl of puff rice. And maybe just like one small half piece of sandesh. But that was generally it for breakfast. It was very light. For lunch, then he would have the standard rice dal and chapati, and then added to that one wet sabji, one dry sabji, and again maybe a small sweet. That was the basic. Then if the cook was good, then they could add more things to that, but those things must be there. And the chapatis, of course, Prabhupada liked them to be cooked hot. They had to be, you know, fresh off the stove. And he had a little bell on his table. So when you first brought the plate in, there would be one hot chapati there. And then as he finished that one, then he would ring the bell, and then we would immediately puff up another one on the flames and then run in with it. From Australia we went to New Zealand, so when we got to New Zealand there was nobody available to cook there. So I was, you know, it was my first time. I had to do the whole thing. So I put the cooker on the flame and went back, finished the massage, came back, and everything was totally ruined. I'd left the flame on too high, so all the dal had dried up in the bottom. The rice was like sludge. It had just, you know, disintegrated. and the vegetables were so soft that they just fell apart. And there was nothing else, and there was nobody else there to, to do a quick job of cooking either. So I had to just serve what I had. So when Prabhupada saw it, he was really disappointed. And he said, "What's this?" So I said, "Well, I must have had the flame too high." So Prabhupada said, "You are too dull." He said, "You cannot cook." So that was my first attempt. It was a disaster. And I felt really bad, actually, because prasadam was a very important thing for Prabhupada. His digestive system at that time was very delicate. And of course, traveling around, it was very important that he get consistent, a consistent standard of food. Otherwise, all kinds of physical problems would, could come about. I remember once in Calcutta when Palika was cooking, and she was about 10 minutes late with his prasadam, and Prabhupada got really angry about it. And he demanded to see her, and she came up, and he really chastised her very strongly. And I hadn't seen him, at least chastise one of his women disciples as strong as that before. And so after he, complained very strongly, then after that he explained, he said, when the appetite comes up, it must be fed, otherwise disease comes. So and we had, when I was with him, I regulated the standard for serving lunch prasadam to 1:30, regardless of when he finished the massage. And so by 1:30, of course, then he expected his prasadam to be there, and that means the thought of eating makes the juices in the stomach begin to flow, and then you have to feed it, otherwise then there's disease. So it was a science, and Prabhupada was aware of that. Apart from that, of course, Prabhupada did have problems in digesting food anyway, so it was very important to give him a good standard of prasadam on a regular basis. But unfortunately, I wasn't very good at it. Prabhupada explained one of his strategies for making people Krishna conscious was to distribute profuse amounts of prasadam, because basically people are almost like animals, in this way they live. They don't know anything other than their bodies. So he said, at least let them eat prasadam. He said, then that way they'll gradually, he said, then that's also Krishna. And they'll gradually develop an attraction to Krishna simply by eating the prasadam. And then when that develops, then they'll be able to inquire about the philosophy, or they'll be able to understand the philosophy simply by eating prasadam. So he said, this is our program, that we want people to become gradually Krishna conscious. And prasadam distribution was one, very definite, obvious way that they could make some advancement. My parents came to see me at the manor, and Prabhupada was in London, and I'd come back from London to the manor to meet with my parents. I hadn't seen them for about 5 years, and they had never seen me as a devotee. So during the course of the afternoon, I went to look for some prasadam for them, and there was none. I was told, well, we have an early Sunday feast here, and there's nothing left. So I was unable to give them any. Anyway, I took them around the manor, and I explained a bit of the philosophy, etc. They were unfortunate in that they didn't get to see Srila Prabhupada. They were just about to leave, because they had a 4-hour drive home, when Prabhupada came back from London, and he came in through the gate just as we were stood there, and they were, saying goodbye. So they kind of got a glimpse, that was all. Anyway, so afterwards, after they'd gone, I went up to see Srila Prabhupada, and he asked me, well, how did it go with your parents? So I said it was very nice, they were very favourable, and I showed them the deities, and we looked around, and I explained a bit of the philosophy. So then Prabhupada said, did they get prasadam? So they said, oh, well, actually I was told there wasn't any. And Prabhupada said, oh. It was almost like, well, what was the use? If they didn't get prasadam, then the whole trip was basically a failure. So, he put a lot of emphasis on prasadam. It was a very practical way, for a person to make advancement in Krishna consciousness.
There is one more lecture by Prabhu, which I'm just sharing by.
one time we were, I think there was myself and Pushta Krishna and Achyutananda in Mayapur, and we were talking about, you know, consciousness and whether every living being is conscious or not. And Achyutananda was trying to argue that actually they're not. The soul may be there, but the consciousness is not displayed. And he said, if you start thinking that every living being is conscious, then you'll go crazy. Because then you'll think, well, all the atoms in the floor are conscious, so if I tread on the floor, it'll hurt them. Or if I close the door too hard, you know, they'll all scream or something. So I was not really satisfied with, you know, his reply to that. And so I went straight in to see Srila Prabhupada and I asked him about it. And then Prabhupada was able to immediately point out a verse in the first canto. And then he gave me this example of how, you know, there's the skin and the nail. So if you cut the skin, then immediately you're hurt. But if you cut the nail, you can do that without any difficulty. So he gave that as an example of how there are different states coming from the same source, but there are different states, and therefore everything is actually, you know, it's Krishna. Everything is Krishna, but Krishna's energies work in different ways. So matter, spirit is actually the same, it's from the same source, but according to how it's used. So that was one question I was able to get cleared up there. I know Prabhupada wasn't very keen on our men making movies. You know, there was a discussion that Gyanagamya had with him in Iran in August of '76, and he was very keen on that at that time of making a big commercial, full-scale movie. You know, the millions of dollars thing, and he had this idea that somehow or another it would popularize the movement. His idea was to show some scenario where the devotees were involved and people could see how we lived and get an appreciation from that. Prabhupada dismissed it. Gyanagamya brought up 5 or 6 different angles. He was desperately trying to get a yes from Prabhupada, but Prabhupada would not give him an endorsement for it at all. And he said, for the kind of money that you're spending, this was one of the arguments that he used, he said, the kind of money that you would spend on that, he said, how many books could you distribute? He said, and I have personal experience anyway, expending so much money and getting practically no result. He said, when I first went to New York, he said, then I put an ad classified in the New York Times. So he said, at that time it cost me so much money, I had practically nothing. For one small ad, it ran for 1 or 2 days or something. He said, I got 3 responses and none of them bought my books. So he said, I have personal experience, this is, a waste of time. Well, I mean, as far as movies go as well, because in India, you can make movies about Krishna. And they've done it very often. But, they always want to focus in on Krishna's 10th canto, Gopi Leelas and things like this. So I remember when we were in Bhubaneswar, this was in late January and very early February of '77. So this movie maker came, 2 or 3 of them came, and they explained to Srila Prabhupada that we're making a movie, we want to popularize Krishna's pastimes. Now Hare Krishna is becoming very popular, and we want that everybody should know about Krishna, and we want to show Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes. And so, we'd like, you are the guru of the Hare Krishna movement, so we would like to get your blessings for making this movie, and we'd also like to just put a little mention of our humble thanks, for the work that you've done in popularizing Krishna's pastimes on the movie. So Prabhupada immediately, told them no. He said, why do you want to immediately jump to Krishna's 10th canto pastimes? So they were saying, but Swamiji, everybody in India is a Krishna Bhakta. And Prabhupada told him, he said, nobody will understand. You'll show them and they'll take it as some mythology. Krishna killing the Trinavata whirlwind or whatever. He said, then they'll all think it's simply mythology. So then they said, but Swamiji, everybody in India, they're all Krishna Bhaktas. So the evening before, Prabhupada had had a conversation with a man who had asked him, actually, who is Krishna? Prabhupada was shocked. He's an Indian man, supposed to be educated, asking who is Krishna, and he chastised him like anything. It was in a darshan. And Prabhupada said, you're born in India, you do not know who is Krishna? And then when he had given his evening lecture, he brought it up in the lecture also, that, here we are in Punya Bhumi, in Bharata Bhumi, and now people are so degraded that they're asking who is Krishna. So now this film man came a day or two later, and he said, oh, but Swamiji, everybody's a Krishna Bhakta. Prabhupada said, you say that they're Krishna Bhaktas, but he is asking who is Krishna. So he said, why don't you make a movie of the first canto? You show that first, and then progress. You go progressively through the Bhagavatam, and then you can do the 10th canto. But of course, they wanted the 10th canto, Krishna with the gopis and this and that. But Prabhupada would not give them an endorsement, because they were simply trying to, capitalize on Prabhupada's popularity. Oh, this movie is approved by Bhaktivedanta Swami. But Prabhupada would not give him an approval. And after about half an hour, again, they brought up various arguments. Prabhupada would not budge an inch on it. He refused. He said, if you make one of the first canto, then we'll see. I particularly remember that he mentioned on one show, there was some kind of Christian minister that was going around and really heavily criticizing us, and he was being invited to different talk shows. So he was criticizing us how we worship this man, this mythological man who had sex with 16,000 wives. And, he was trying to make out that actually the whole basis of our movement is immorality. It's a typical kind of thing that people think that Krishna is an ordinary man and that he's immoral. And so Prabhupada then very nicely, very strongly, but very expertly explained how sex desire is there originally in the spiritual world. And for Krishna, sex is not bad. He's God. He enjoys everything. So why only 16,000? He can enjoy 16 million. And for him it is not bad. But he said, for you, it is bad. He said, you cannot have sex. And, attacking. This was Prabhupada's method. He would cut them down and give, real philosophical reasons, but really punch them home as well. It was very strong. So he explained there that how, the Adi-ras, that's the original form of sex desire, the original rasas that Krishna has in the spiritual world. But in the material world, when they imitate Krishna, then it becomes the most degraded. So for Krishna, what is the most highest activity, when it's reflected pervertedly in the material world, it becomes the very lowest and the most degraded. And so that was one point anyway that he explained there. And again, also, when we got to Mayapur in '77, that was just before Prabhupada got his that really bad sickness, which eventually led to his disappearance. We had been down to Bhubaneswar, and then we came up to Calcutta to stay for a month or so. And one man came from Mahesh Pandit's Samadhi, and he was a pujari there, like the Saivite, and he wanted Srila Prabhupada to come and do a program there. We knew it was going to be very small, what we would kind of consider a rinky-dink little affair, We knew it. And but Prabhupada immediately agreed to the man's request. He had come during the massage and spoke in Bengali. So Prabhupada agreed, and then he went away. But I couldn't speak Bengali, but I knew what was going on. So then I was kind of unhappy, because I knew how weak Prabhupada was by that time. And in fact, when we first arrived in Mayapur, one morning on the balcony after breakfast, Prabhupada was looking out over the fields, and then he turned to me and he said, never in my life have I felt as weak as I do now. But then he added, he said, but still I would like to finish this Bhagavatam. And I had seen evidences of Prabhupada's decrease in general health and fitness. Several times I had to literally pick him up when he had collapsed on staircases. So anyway, I was just very concerned. So when this man came, I really didn't want Prabhupada to go. And so I asked him, kind of a little complainingly, I guess, Srila Prabhupada, why do you have to go? He said, no, he's asked, I must go. He said, it's preaching. So I said, but Prabhupada, there's so many sannyasis here, they can all do the program. He said, no, he wants me to go, I must go. So, because I was a bit upset by it, then Prabhupada said, just like, that story in the Krishna book about Pradyumna, he was injured on the battlefield, and so when he was taken, then immediately he went back to fight, even though he was injured. So he said that was his duty. So then I said, but Srila Prabhupada, it was his charioteer's duty to take him off the battlefield when he was sick. So then Prabhupada said, yes, and it was his duty to immediately return and fight. So he defeated me, So that was, again, it was his determination, and we did do that program. Prabhupada just simply wanted to encourage the man, and we went and we did that program. And I remember that it was, there was like a pandal, a stage, and there was some really rickety steps, about 4 or 5 steps leading up to the stage. So when Prabhupada approached that to go up, he didn't ask for help or anything. And he immediately, started stepping up one by one. And by that time, I was already aware of how weak he was. So I was standing on the step below him. As he went up one step, I went up one step. And I had my hands out like this, just in case anything happened. And Prabhupada was actually pushing himself up the steps with his cane. He had so little strength in his legs. So he put one foot up. And then to get the other one up, he would actually push himself up with this cane. So when he got to the second to top step, he was straining like anything. And then all of a sudden, his strength went and he just collapsed. But I was right behind him, stood on the lower step, and I just caught him. And I just, had to literally carry him up to the top and put him on the stage. And I put him up there, and Prabhupada just, walked over to his seat and sat down like nothing had happened. So, yeah.
Hare Krishna. So now we'll be hearing the glorification of His Grace Hari Sauri Prabhu. Hare Krishna Maharaj and Pranam. So just sharing the PPT.
My surface disturbance of the internet.
Yes, Maharaj. So Prabhuji's introduction. His Grace Hari Sauri Prabhu was born in England, November 17, 1950. His name was John Allen Richardson. And he was raised in United Kingdom in his youth. And then he migrated to Australia in May 1971. So in his early days, in his youth age, he explored spirituality, and between the countercultural era of 1960s and 70s, finally he got connected to the Hare Krishna devotees, and he was very much attracted by these devotees of ISKCON, and soon he dedicated his life to Krishna consciousness. So about how he got initiated to Srila Prabhupada, it was when he moved to Australia. Over there, he got connected to the ISKCON devotees and thus got initiated by Srila Prabhupada on April 9, 1972 in Sydney. So the major service that Prabhuji has done was personal service to Srila Prabhupada, and it is known all wide that from 1975 to 77, he was the servant of Srila Prabhupada for exactly duration of 16 months. So Prabhuji also served Srila Prabhupada as his personal secretary and servant from November 1975 until Srila Prabhupada's departure in November 1977. And during this time, he traveled extensively with Srila Prabhupada across India, world, and got a lot of personal instructions from Srila Prabhupada. And he has recorded all these experiences, which became the basis of his famous diary series, which is documenting the final years of Srila Prabhupada's life. And about his temple and leadership services. So he was temple commander at Krishna Balram Mandir, ISKCON Vrindavan. Was also appointed GBC for Australia, New Zealand, and Indonesia in 1977. He oversaw growth from 4 centers to 17 temples and ashrams, established 4 farms, 2 gurukuls and restaurants, set up BBT branches in Australia and Indonesia. So, coming up to the publishing and preservation of the books which he has given. So, he's the author of Transcendental Diary, which is in 5 volumes, and it records Srila Prabhupada's final years. So, as of now, it's up to 6 volumes as far as I know. And these diaries give a day-to-day detailed account of Srila Prabhupada's travels. So, it was personally known about, how we maintain diary. So, I used to maintain diary about Srila Prabhupada's daily activities, his preaching schedules, his travels, his teachings, his personal habits, his intimate dealings with disciples and well wishes. So, this is a very amazing work by Prabhuji, author of Transcendental Diary, the 5 volumes. And like many of the references, it works as an appendix for all the devotees because it gives many anecdotes about how Srila Prabhupada used to deal with devotees and personally guide devotees about a particular thing or services. So he was also the publisher for Back to Godhead magazine, 1990. He was director of Bhaktivedanta Research Center, Kolkata. Preserves and digitalizes rare Vaishnav text, academic hub for Gaudiya Vaishnavism. GBC service and leadership. In March 1977, Srila Prabhupada appointed him as GBC for Australia, New Zealand, and Indonesia. He served in this role for 7+ years, oversaw ISKCON's growth in the region, and expanded from, as I've said, like 4 centers to 17 temples, 4 farm communities, 2 schools. And he also established Bhaktivedanta Book Trust in Australia and Indonesia, and instrumental in building strong foundations for ISKCON in the South Seas. Apart from these mentioned, he has also helped various temple management and in countries like United Kingdom, continents, and United States of America and Australia. He has been spreading Krishna consciousness and deity worship standards for a long time, and we have been known like how he was intimately associated with Srila Prabhupada. So he was very active in preserving Srila Prabhupada's legacy through books, lectures, and mentoring devotees worldwide. And apart from this, he was also founder and manager of Prabhupada Vision. Prabhupada Vision. It was a forum dedicated to keeping Srila Prabhupada in the center of ISKCON life. Writing and publications. He began in 1986 to transform this detailed diary into book series. So, as I told about the Transcendental Diary, it was a 5 volume book about how Srila Prabhupada's detailed modes, instructions, and travels are penned down. And in 1990, he served as a publisher for Back to Godhead magazine in the United States of America. Later years and ongoing services. So Prabhuji now resides in Mayapur, ISKCON World headquarters with his family. He's a director of Bhaktivedanta Research Center, an academic and archival resource of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. His houses and digitalize rare and ancient Vaishnav text, dedicated to preserving Vaishnav heritage for future generation, continues to write and share his personal memories of Srila Prabhupada. Now coming about his personal qualities, his personality. So loyal, disciplined, and deeply devoted to Srila Prabhupada, known for his attention to detail, sincerity, and straightforwardness. So Prabhuji actually is known for his down-to-earth, practical, and very humorous nature. So I have been personally witnessing Prabhuji for the Tirubhav Mahotsav of Gurmaj in Mayapur. So Prabhuji is very down-to-earth. You won't recognize like Prabhuji walking by your side, and then you will be realizing when he is on the stage that he is Hari Sauri Prabhu himself, the most known servant of Srila Prabhupada. He's very down to earth, and whenever you approach him with a practical question, he would answer to each and every of your question. And especially I have seen that once I went to record a video with Prabhuji. So he was very practical and humorous. And at every point of time, he used to quote an anecdote with Srila Prabhupada that if this question was asked to Srila Prabhupada, how Srila Prabhupada would reply to that question. And he would answer that question in that same mood in which Srila Prabhupada used to say out. And yeah, he always shares the first-hand memories with Srila Prabhupada so that he could inspire everyone. And to the second and third generation, which we are right now, he used to show what we haven't seen, like the missing of Srila Prabhupada. He used to show, you haven't seen Prabhupada, but you see how Srila Prabhupada used to speak. So he used to quote Srila Prabhupada for any question or any query. And till now, Prabhuji continues to travel, write, and give talks about Srila Prabhupada's mission and inspire devotees to be Krishna consciousness, be Krishna conscious. And he's known for his attention to detail. So I remember one quote, like one of the anecdotes which he said about Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhuji said that he was very particular and very scrutinizingly observing Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada said, like, you observe me a lot. So he said, Srila Prabhupada, it's my nature that I give attention to every detail. So it's as it is said that he's known for his attention to detail, sincerity, and straightforwardness. He's a guardian of Srila Prabhupada's mood and instructions, inspires devotees through living example of dedication and fidelity. Remembering Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada explained that one of his strategies for making people Krishna conscious was to distribute profuse amount of prasadam. He said that people are almost like animals in the way they live. They don't know anything other than their bodies. At least let them eat prasadam, for that's also Krishna. He said our program is to help people gradually become Krishna conscious. Simply by eating prasadam, they will gradually develop an attraction to Krishna. And when that develops, they will be able to understand the philosophy simply by eating prasadam. Prasadam distribution was one definite way that people could make some advancement. We can see what an amazing quote which he quoted about Srila Prabhupada. So we have been blessed with association of such amazing Vaishnavas. Even till date, if you go to Mayapur, you generally find Prabhuji's association in Sridham Mayapur in various occasions. So it's been amazing that we have such amazing Vaishnavas. And apart from this, I've been seeing that Prabhuji now doesn't travel much. He stays in Mayapur and he keeps on preaching over there. You can find him on book counters and everything, where he distributes books. And even if you go ask any personal query about Srila Prabhupada, his association with Srila Prabhupada and memories with him, he happily shares that, and you can sit with him. Like if you go to Mayapur Kirtan Mela, he sits on a stall and he can sign the books, he can tell Srila Prabhupada stories and everything like a loving grandfather for kids like us. So it's so amazing that we have such, I would say, replica of Srila Prabhupada, because in a form, what we observe Srila Prabhupada is Srila Prabhupada's Vani and spiritual personalities like Hari Sauri Prabhu and many others. So it's a great fortune that we still have such amazing personalities with us. So make sure whenever you're around such personalities, make sure to have association of them so that you can get a glimpse of how Srila Prabhupada was. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Jai His Grace Hari Sauri Prabhu ki Jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol.